If you hate knitting rectangular scarves because it is just miles and miles of the same row, then this could potentially be the scarf for you. I'm calling this my Crocodile Smile scarf because I think that these little points that you create in your knitting look a little bit like crocodile teeth, so when you're wearing the scarf, it's like you've got a big smiley happy crocodile around your neck, or at least that's what I like to think. It is a really lovely rhythmic repeat, working increases and decreases to create these lovely points, which means that you are always having to think about what you're doing, which for me takes away the boredom of just knitting the same row over and over. And I found that this scarf grew super quickly off my needles, so it's worth giving a go, even if you traditionally absolutely hate knitting scarves, trust me. To knit this scarf, I used just 2 balls of yarn, and the yarn that I used for this was Signet Boho Spirit in the shade Afterglow. You can use any yarn that you like, but these roving yarns that have the really long colour changes just work really well for this design. You're also going to need a set of knitting needles in the size that's appropriate for your yarn, and in the case of this scarf I used 4mm needles. You can knit this on straight needles or circular needles, it doesn't matter because there isn't too many stitches to accommodate. So without further ado, let's grab some yarn, grab some needles and get knitting. The first part of the scarf that we need to work is that lovely pointy end bit, and rather than having any stitches to cast on, you are just going to make a slip knot and pop it on your needle because we start with just 1 stitch on our needles. The first row we work is a setup row, and of all the rows in the project, this can be the fiddliest. Into this first stitch here, you want to work a knit front back increase. So you want to pop your needle in as if to knit, and then work as if you were going to knit the first stitch, but do not drop this loop off your left hand needle. Then you want to swing your needle round and pop it back into the stitch from the front to the back, and then pick up a second loop and pull through, and at that point you can drop your stitch from your left hand needle. So what you have done is you have worked 1 stitch and turned it into 2. Row 2 and every subsequent row until you have a total of 40 stitches on your needles is the same. You are going to knit every single stitch until the final stitch. In my case here, I only have 2 stitches on my needles, so I'm going to knit the first stitch, and then the final stitch I'm going to work a knit front back increase. So each row that we work, we are increasing by 1 stitch. You can see here I've gone from 2 to 3. So just to cover that repeat once more, you are going to knit any stitches until you have 1 stitch left on your left hand needle. So I'm going to knit the first 2 stitches in this case because I have 3 stitches on my left hand needle. And then the final stitch of each row is a knit front back increase. So you're going to pop your needle in as if to knit, pick up 1 loop, but don't drop it off your left hand needle, swing your knitting needle round and pop it into the stitch again from front to back, pick up a second loop, pull it through, and then you can drop it off your left hand needle, and you should have gone from 3 stitches to 4. One last time, and then I'm going to let you go away and increase until you have a total of 40 stitches. So in this case we're going to knit the first 3 stitches. Any other row you're just going to knit until you have 1 stitch left on your left hand needle, and then the final stitch of every increase row is a knit front back increase. What you want to now go away and do is work this repeat until you can count a total of 40 stitches on your needle after you have finished a row. So at the end of each row, take a little stitch count, and when you hit 40 stitches, that's when you need to stop your increase section, and then we will talk through the decrease section, which is what creates the diamond shape because you increase up and then decrease down. I've got 40 stitches on my needles now, so what we are going to do is swap from increasing to decreasing. So we're now going to work to reduce our stitches down from a high point of 40 down to 20. Same principle that we are working across knitting, but instead of increasing at the end of the row, we are going to decrease. Every row in your decrease section is exactly the same. It's a 1 row repeat. You want to knit all the way across until you have 2 stitches left on your left hand needle. So whereas when we were increasing, we worked across until we had 1 stitch left, when you're working your decreases, you want to work across until you have 2 stitches left. We work our decrease over the last 2 stitches of the row, and the decrease that we are using for this project is we are going to knit 2 together through the back loops. So whereas for a standard knit 2 together you would grab 2 stitches as if to knit, when you are working a knit 2 together through the back loops, you want to go into both stitches as if you are going to purl. So you're going to pop your needle in from right to left and from front to back of those 2 stitches, and then you're just going to pick up a loop and knit the 2 of them together as 1 stitch. And there you go, you've reduced from 40 to 39. And I'll just show you that repeat row once more before I leave you to carry on by yourself. You start your repeat row by knitting all the way across until you have 2 stitches left on your left hand needle. You're then going to work your decrease across the last 2 stitches of the row, and we're going to knit 2 stitches together through the back loop. So you're going to pop your needle in from front to back, so from right to left. You don't want to go from left to right. And then once you've popped your needle through both loops from front to back, you are just going to knit them together as normal. What you want to go away and do now is repeat this decrease row until you have 20 stitches on your needle. So you want to decrease down to half the amount of stitches that you started with. So we reached a widest point of 40 stitches, and now you want to decrease down until you can count 20 stitches on your needles after you have finished a row. Once you've worked your decrease rows and have 20 stitches left on your needle, you're ready to switch and work your next increase section. This is worked in exactly the same way as the increase rows that we worked for the very beginning of the scarf, but the exception is that we are starting with 20 stitches instead of just 1. So just a very quick recap on how we work an increase row. You're going to knit every single stitch with the exception of the final stitch. So knit all the way across until you have 1 stitch left on your left hand needle to work. And the very last stitch is the stitch that you work your increase on, and the increase that we worked throughout the whole of this project is the knit front back increase. So you're going to pop your needle in as if to knit and pick up a loop as if to knit, but instead of letting the stitch drop off your left hand needle, you're going to swing your needle back round, pop it in between the 2 legs of that stitch from front to back, pick up a second loop, and then once you've picked up 2 loops, you can let your left hand needle out and the stitch drop off it, and you will have increased by 1 stitch. So if you were to count your stitches now, you would have gone from 20 to 21. And you want to repeat that increase row until you have 40 stitches on your needle again. So I've increased back up to 40 stitches, and then I'm going to switch back to my decrease rows and decrease back down to 20. And for the rest of the scarf, you are going to repeat these decrease and increase sections to create these diamond shapes. Once you are ready to finish your scarf, so the scarf is the length that you want it, you need to work 1 final decrease section. But instead of stopping at 20 stitches, you are going to carry on decreasing all the way down. So I'll go ahead and do that now just to show you what I mean. One quick recap of that decrease row, just in case you need it. You're going to knit all the way across until you have 2 stitches left on your left hand needle. Across those final 2 stitches of the row, you're going to work your decrease, and that is a knit 2 together through the back loops. So instead of picking up your stitches like this as if to knit, you're going to pop your needle into them as if to purl, and then you are going to knit the stitch as normal. And if we're assuming that this is the final section that we're going to work, that we have a lovely long scarf full of diamonds and this is our final decrease section, you are now going to decrease all the way down. So keep going once you hit 20 stitches until you have just 2 stitches left on your needle, and that's where I'll pick up next. Once you've decreased all the way down and just have 2 stitches left to work on your next row, you want to just tweak things slightly, because obviously we have no stitches left available to knit before we work a decrease. So the final row that we are going to work is literally just a knit 2 together through the back loops. There are no knit stitches to work. So just as we have been doing for all of our decreases, you want to pop your right hand needle in from right to left and through from the front to the back, and then pick up your stitch and pull through both loops, and you have decreased from 2 down to 1. At this point you want to pull your loop and make it slightly bigger and get rid of your needles because you don't need those anymore, and you can now break your yarn. Make sure that you leave a nice long tail, at least 20 centimeters long, because you're going to need to sew that tail in securely to finish off your scarf. To secure this final loop and this stitch and to prevent it from unraveling, I like to grab my tail and thread it through that enlarged final stitch, and then if you just pull gently and tighten it all up, you've then got a nice secure point at which you can sew in your ends. A couple of quick tips and tricks before I go. One, I made my scarf 19 diamonds long using 4mm needles and the Signet Boho Spirit yarn, but you can make your scarf as long or as short as you want. You can literally just work as many diamonds as you want for the size that you prefer. Two, you don't have to stick to 40-20 for your stitches if you don't want to. If you are using a thicker yarn, you can work less stitches. If you are using a thinner yarn, you can work more stitches. The golden rule is that whatever number you increase to should be an even number, so that you can decrease to half of that number. So for instance, if you're using a thicker chunky yarn, you could increase to just 20 stitches and then decrease down to 10. And again, if you're using a thinner yarn, you might need to increase to 60 stitches and then decrease down to 30. Don't let my 40-20 ratio be a hard and fast rule for you. This pattern will work with any stitch count as long as it's an even number, so that you can halve it nicely when it comes to your decrease. As always, I've left a written pattern on my blog for you, and I've linked that down below. In that blog post, I cover all of the details that I've covered in this video, along with a written pattern. So if you want a quick reference to anything that I've covered in this video, that's a really good place to start. And that's how you knit my Crocodile Smile scarf. If you're looking for more scarf inspiration, then I'm going to link another pattern up here now that I think you will enjoy just as much. But that's all from me for today, and I'll see you again for another video soon.